From New York One News, this is a Campaign 97 special presentation, a Democratic mayoral debate. Here is Louis Doblin.
Good evening and welcome to St. Francis College in Brooklyn for tonight's debate among the 4 candidates for the Democratic nomination for mayor. This is the first time in the city's history that candidates for citywide office are being required to debate if they want to receive any public financing for their campaign. Tonight's debate and others later in the campaign season are being held under the auspices of the city's Campaign Finance Board. The board chairman and president of Fordham University is Father John O'Hare. Father?
Welcome to the first ever mandatory debate for New York City candidates for office. The Campaign Finance Board administers the city's voluntary campaign finance program, whose intention is to reduce the influence of big money in elections and increase public access to information about the candidates, including their fundraising activities. Candidates who freely choose to participate in the program voluntarily accept limitations on their contributions and expenditures, and then in turn receive matching funds, public funds, to support their campaign. This year there is a new debate requirement for program participants who are running for citywide office. Information on the debates is available in the board's 1997 voter guide, which you'll receive in the mail before both the primary and the general election. We want to congratulate the candidates who are here tonight for their choice of participating in the campaign finance program, and we want to also congratulate the sponsors who have volunteered to sponsor these debates. For this evening's debate, the board selected New York One, WNYC, El Diario La Prensa, and St. Francis College as sponsors for the first primary election debate ever. We hope you find these debates helpful as you make up your mind about who you're going to vote for on Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Father O'Hare. Now, over the next hour and a half, the candidates will debate their views of the present and their visions for the future of the city of New York. They are Ruth Messenger, Eric Ruano Melendez, the Reverend Al Sharpton, and Sal Albanese. Now, the order of their introduction was chosen by lot, which also determined the order of their opening statements. We want to remind everybody here that this evening is for the candidates, and we don't express or expect the audience to express any opinion or any overzealous reaction to anything that's said by the candidates, we hope. Okay, each candidate has 2 minutes, starting with Ms. Messenger.
Thank you. This election is about the future. Your future, your kids' future, New York's future. It's about having a mayor who will make sure all our kids learn the skills they need to compete in a 21st century economy. A mayor as dedicated to putting struggling New Yorkers back to work as to giving George Steinbrenner a new baseball stadium or Rupert Murdoch a new television channel. A mayor who will not rest as long as a single child goes hungry, a single battered woman cannot find refuge, or school children have to go to school in converted closets, stairwells, and bathrooms. It's about having a mayor who recognizes that the brutal assault of Abner Louima is one of too many incidents of police brutality. A mayor who will not wait until an election year to speak out against this kind of outrageous conduct. Thanks to 2 mayors, 4 police commissioners, and thousands of good cops, we're winning the war against crime. But there are other battles to be won. Fewer than half of our kids read at grade level. 1 in every 10 New Yorkers is out of work, and we're losing our jobs to suburbanites. 72,000 people are turned away every month from soup kitchens. And whether anyone wants to talk about it or not, there are still homeless people in New York.
30 seconds.
If you think all of the battles have been won, that our schools are as good as they can be, that city government is as efficient as possible, that our city can afford to have the highest unemployment rate in the country, then vote for Rudy. But if you believe that all the battles have not been won, that we need smarter schools, a stronger economy, a leaner city government, and most importantly, kids ready for the 21st century, then let me lead the way.
Thank you, Ms. Messenger. Eric Ruano Melendez.
My dear fellow New Yorkers, I'm running for mayor in order to bring fundamental change to New York City and to restore honest, decent, effective government to our country and our city. I'm running for mayor because I want to be a mayor for each and every one of you and the city of New York. I have been working as a civil engineer for the Department of Environmental Protection Administration for the past 20 years. I'm a former U.S. Army second lieutenant, real estate broker, and developer, and I also served during the Vietnam War. I'm a union delegate, I'm an immigrant, I'm the only Hispanic candidate running for mayor. As an engineer, I was trained to develop cities, to manage people, and I know how to efficiently restore problems with the infrastructure. Our infrastructure has been going down. However, the crime is also going down. However, we still have problems with the employment. 10% of employment in the city of New York. Crime has decreased in the city of New York. However, there is still 10% unemployment. To create jobs, I will push to make New York City the 51st state.
30 seconds.
As a state, we will have a stronger economy. If you elect me your mayor, I promise to be the mayor for all of you, for every race, culture, and religion. I will privatize the educational system. Our children deserve the best education. I will use the National Guard to assist and supervise the police department to fight criminals and drug dealers. I will open 24 hours.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ruano Melendez. We have a strict time guideline. The Reverend Al Sharpton.
The election in November will determine the future of the city and determine how the city of New York will enter the 21st century. But before the election in November, there's the primary in September. And this primary must be about the definition of what the Democratic Party stands for and who it stands for and what it stands against. So clearly the issue of unemployment, clearly the issue of over half the students between the 3rd and 8th grades in public schools not being able to read at grade level, clearly the issues of police brutality, clearly these are issues that our present administration and present mayor have failed at. The issue is, are we going to try and imitate him? Are we going to try and play games of watering down some hard decisions? Are we going to be the alternative to him and walk to victory because people are ready for change? The fact of the matter is that the Democratic Party in this city has to make a decision, and a hard decision, on whether we want to be imitation Republicans or whether we want to be real Democrats that represent the disaffected, that represent the disenfranchised, that represent the people that are the majority of the city. Those are the people that are sitting in a city now where commuters take their jobs at lower taxes.
30.
That is why it is unbelievable to me the party leadership was quiet around the Luma tragedy. That is unbelievable. In 1992, when Rodney King happened, you couldn't imagine a race for mayor in L.A. where most of the candidates had nothing to say for days. But that happened in New York. And that's why we need to deal with definition in September to achieve victory in November.
That would be 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Sharpton. Sal Albanese.
Good evening. Let me first commend New York One, WNYC, and El Diario for sponsoring this important forum. The purpose of tonight's forum is to distinguish the candidates, and there are important differences between us, so we can field the strongest possible Democrat against Rudy Giuliani in November. I believe I'm the strongest candidate, not only because of my vision for the city of New York, but also my experience in areas that most New Yorkers care about. For example, take crime and policing. I've spent 15 years on the Public Safety Committee of the City Council. I'm an established expert on policing in this city. I teach criminal law at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Take education. I spent 11 years in the New York City Public Schools as a teacher. I have 2 daughters who graduated from those schools. I'm also one of the most chronic critics of this administration's failure in education, early and consistent critic of the Giuliani administration when it comes to our public schools. Take the issue of economic fairness at a time when wages for workers are eroding. I sponsored and passed the living wage bill in the City Council, which is now a national model as this administration begins to move the city towards a low-wage economy. Take the issue of political reform, which is essential to public policy in this city. Despite this forum tonight, the fact of the matter is that big money dominates politics in this city and throughout this country. I have a bill called the Albanese Clean Elections Act, which reforms the way we conduct our politics in the city. Take the issue of independence and fairness. In my 15 years on the City Council, I've never pandered. I've always been even-handed. I've always exhibited the leadership based on what the facts were in different situations. It is those kinds of characteristics that can bring people together in this city, which we desperately need for the year 2000 and beyond. So we will never have incidents again like the horrific incident in the 70th precinct. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, Mr. Melendez. You had about 10 seconds left, but it doesn't carry over, so you just gave it to the... Okay. We now turn to questions from a panel of journalists representing the 3 news organizations which are sponsoring tonight's debate along with St. Francis College. They are Dominic Carter of New York One News, Beth Fertig of WNYC Radio, and columnist Erson Barrero of El Diario de la Prensa. Okay, in each round, a question will be posed to one of the candidates with the others having the opportunity to respond. Then the candidate who answered originally will be allowed a short rebuttal. There are no set times for answers, responses, or rebuttals, but candidates who drift from answering the comment or answering the question at hand will be advised to stick to the subject. Dominic Carter of New York One has the first question of Ruth Messenger.
Thank you very much, Louis, and good evening to all. The case of Abner Louima is one that has shocked the entire country. The Giuliani administration has described it as an isolated incident. You released a statement just a few hours ago saying the mayor's task force looking into this, it looks like an election year public relations stunt. How widespread is police brutality here in New York City, and how differently would you have handled the Louima case than Mayor Giuliani?
Spoken out against this horrific incident of abuse as I have against virtually every incident of police brutality in the time I've been in public life. What the mayor is doing in this case is trying to move to see who did wrong in the 70th precinct. It is regrettable that it appears to have taken a full hospital corroboration and a 10-week before the election event to get the mayor to speak out. The problem for this city has been that this mayor has been too often silent in the many other cases of police brutality. There is a pattern of police brutality. There are a rising number of incidents, and that's why what I called on the mayor to do last week was to appoint a truly independent commission in which various people, particularly the district attorneys of this city, would make appointments to the commission and charge the commission to look beyond who did wrong in the 70th precinct to the question of what went wrong. What is behind this growing number of incidents of police abuse and brutality, and how do we get a city in which we take whatever steps, from reforming the Civilian Complaint Review Board to better recruitment to more comprehensive training, so that incidents like this, which stunned the city of New York, which stunned and distressed the average police officer in this city, do not happen again.
All right. Would you like to respond, Mr. Melendez?
Well, there is nothing new about police brutality in the city of New York. This case is not an isolated case. It has been going on through too many years. However, what I said 4 years ago, we can use the National Guard and the FBI to supervise the police department. and to assist it. They are out of control. I don't think they are also capable and well-trained. Besides that, they don't live in New York. They don't have a resident requirement to stay in New York. That's part of the problem. They don't understand what is to live in New York. You need more more police officers with experience in the city. The training that is provided is very, very, very naive compared to the training that we have in the Army Corps of Engineers, the Marines, or the Navy. I know that because I'm a former officer, and I know that we train the soldiers to respect, to deal with the community in time of war and in time of peace. So far, I guess there should be an independent civilian review board, not from the mayor, not from the board of presidents, not from any council or any assemblyman. Should be directly from the public, an independent civilian public who really review those issues, because this is a human rights abuse that is spreading in the daily basis, and we can't accept something like that anymore. We have to stop it. We have to provide.
Okay, Mr. Melendez, these rebuttals have to be brief. Thank you. Reverend Sharpton?
Well, again, I think, first of all, I would disagree with Ms. Messenger that the mayor was silent. The mayor has aggressively defended many actions that were deemed brutal. He has not been silent. If he had been silent, it might have been a different climate. I think that he has gone out of his way to try and be on the other side of cases even before we got the evidence in. We must always remember the mayor was the third person in the photo of Desmond Robinson, a black officer shot in his back, who allegedly had said, "I forgive you," to his assailant, and we found out there was a fraudulent photo. So if some people approach the mayor's last week conversion on police accountability, and I'm a minister, I believe in converts, but I also believe in monitoring converts to make sure they're really converted. I think that we also must look at the fact that we don't need a new panel. There was a Mullen Commission that made very concrete findings, concrete recommendations. The city council passed the recommendations. He vetoed it. The city council overrode the veto. He went to court. This is not somebody silent. This is someone that aggressively fought having redress in police abuse, police corruption. Now he wants to have a panel, and he has the audacity to tell police to let's sit down and have sessions with their critics. Here's a mayor who won't even answer a question of his critics, and he's going to tell police to sit down. If he wants to have that kind of spirit, he should set that example. I live in the 70th precinct. Why doesn't the mayor meet me at the 70th precinct and have the first session to show the police how to do it? Talk with his critics, and let's talk about policing. He won't set that example because this is nothing but electioneering at the expense of taxpayers. We need systemic change in how policing is done in this city. Yes, we need an independent review board.
Mr.
Yes,
Sharpton.
we need residency laws, but we also need to review police. It doesn't matter where this officer lives.
Okay,
what
thank you for these
he did had
comments.
nothing to do with where he
Mr.
lived,
Sharpton,
it's where he went to work.
We
and
should
how
move on.
he
Thank
went
you
to
very
work.
much for those comments. Mr. Albanese?
First of all, let me say, I spoke out on this horrific incident the day it took place, and I pointed out aggressively that any officers involved with this should be dismissed and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But this has to be taken a look at from a broader context. The fact of the matter is that you need leadership when it comes to the issue of abuse. I dusted off my copy of the Mullen Commission report that Reverend Sharpton just referred to, which, by the way, the report was concluded in 1994 during the tenure of this mayor, which came to the conclusion that the vast majority of officers in the city are honest and hardworking, yet abuse and corruption is a problem. The fact of the matter is that this mayor has not acknowledged it. He hasn't talked about it as a problem, has not been proactive about it. Now he wants to spend $15 million of taxpayer money to basically reinvent the wheel. We passed the Mullen Commission recommendations. He blocked it in court. There were a whole host of reforms that I've called for which would maintain the integrity of the department and protect the vast majority of good officers in this city. And what you also need as a mayor is you have to demonstrate leadership. You have to point out that you want officers to be proactive but not abusive. The fact of the matter is that we've seen incidents in this city where people pander. For example, the mayor went out in Washington Heights and pointed out during the Cedeno shooting that Mr. Cedeno lunged at the officer. That information was false. One of my opponents in this race, Ms. Messenger, a few years ago in Washington Heights, went out and condemned the police officer before she even knew the facts. So that's the kind of leadership we do not need. We need to be even-handed. We need to wait for the facts to be concluded before we mouth off on these issues. So we have a situation in the city where people look at the leadership as measured, and we don't pander. The commission's board is a board that makes an awful lot of sense, where we can audit the Internal Affairs Bureau of the Police Department to make sure that the mechanism is in place to prevent corruption and abuse. The department has a massive management failure. For example, I pointed out a few years ago, when you have massive hiring of police officers, before you finish background checks, cops are on the street, you risk the possibility of having ticking time bombs on the street. Unfortunately, when we had massive hiring and cops were on the street before background checks and psychologicals were even completed. Supervisor,
we're going to have to move on to our next question. Thank you for your response. Yes.
Could I go back to this at some point? Because I think this is
well,
an important
I think
issue.
that at some point there are many
I
other
have
questions.
two
At
other
some point we'll
points
get
I'd
back
like
to
to
that
make on
issue.
this.
Yes, we're just out of time on this particular one. Beth Fertig of WNYC has the next question. I'm sorry? Your rebuttal. That's right. Thank you. She knows the format better than I do.
I think
That's suspicious.
that what is
I'll be going there.
just did my homework, Al. I think what is most troubling in this entire last week is the fact that the cops who attacked Abner Louima said it's Giuliani time and appeared to believe that they could get away with it, which is why I believe that a mayor must speak out, that what the city must do is to act, to investigate, to hold wrongdoers accountable, to get to the bottom of why acts like this occur, and indeed to be set up so they don't occur again. I support the recommendations of the Mellon Commission. I would make one other point, and that is we've all talked about an independent civilian complaint review board. We also need a police department that is prepared to act on the findings of that civilian complaint review board. The Giuliani Police Department, in 20,000 cases where the civilian review board only referred 700 as substantiated, failed to act or to tell us what they were doing in 3/4 of those cases. And in the ones where they did act, only once did they actually recommend dismissal of an officer. That is a board that is set up to make a difference for civilians that is not being allowed by the administration to do its
Ms.
job.
Messenger, you've reached your time limit. Thank you very much. Beth Fertig of WNYC Radio for Eric Ruano Melendez.
Mr. Ruano Melendez, I want to get back to this idea about the National Guard. When you ran for mayor in 1993, you suggested that the city call in the National Guard to help keep crime down in neighborhoods where it was out of control. Now that crime is down, why do you still think the National Guard has a role to play in policing the city? And what changes, if any, do you think are needed in the training and supervision of police officers?
Apparently, the crime is down or decreases nationwide. I mean, people is giving credit to the mayor for the decrease. However, that's a nationwide issue. We still need to supervise those police officers, those prisons, because everywhere in the city, if you go south of the Bronx, south of Jamaica, wherever is happening this confrontation this year, you realize that you really need an enforcement or more police. You need more security. You have those corrupted cops in different areas that are out of control. I mean, they think there is their home. They can do whatever they want with anybody on the street. And this is wrong. I understand that enforcement has to be done properly, but the way that is done right now, it is wrong. Let me tell you, in Puerto Rico, the National Guard was successful to fight crimes. They got rid of most of the drug dealers. When they stopped it, they came back again. In California, the National Guard also assists the police department, and they were very successful. Why? Because the officers in the Army, the Marines, the Navy, They are more professional than the officers that are in the police department right now. The trainer is more efficient. They are prepared for war. Right now we have a domestic war. Even you don't believe that there is no domestic war in this city right now. We have terrorists trying to knock down the buildings. So they have to deal with heavy artillery, domestic artillery. So the armed forces are the ones that are prepared to deal with those actions.
Thank you, Mr. Melendez. Mr. Sharpton, your response.
Well, I think that if the idea of bringing in National Guard is to bring down crime, again, we've got to deal with how policing is done in the city, period, and how it is accountable. When I talk about independent review board on a police level, I'm talking about a board that can make direct recommendations on termination and suspension, not just pass it back to the police department. I think that is one of the reasons why I joined the families of the Liuma family's attorneys in calling for the federal government to come in on this case, because there is a real lack of confidence among many of us on how local law enforcement has dealt with many cases. Let us remember, we've seen indictments before. Lavoti was indicted and went to trial, waived a jury, and was acquitted. We saw where the Campbell case, where there was even a conviction and the policeman sent home on bail. There needs to be a real attitude of trying to punish criminals in blue uniforms like we do in blue jeans. So how would we train police? They need to be trained in terms of their sensitivity. They need to be able to deal with the facts of the communities they're policing. SAFA today is going to all of a sudden do what he and his boss, Police Commissioner Giuliani, always criticized us about, and that is putting people into the precinct that understands the community. When I used to say that, that was scandalous. Today they announce it like it's a new idea that dropped from heaven when it was always down here on earth if they would just listen to people. I think that that's how we need to deal with training policemen, and just bringing in people that call themselves National Guard that does not have the same sensitivity and background will not alleviate the problem of crime or brutality. I think that we must be very careful about training law enforcement and making them understand they're not above the law. They are there to enforce the law and protect the public, not tame the public.
Thank you, Mr. Sharpton. Mr. Albanese.
I don't think we need the National Guard. Let's not forget that we still have a very good police department, that in fact just a few miles from here, 2 weeks ago, officers went into an apartment where they were about to blow up a subway car the following day. Hundreds of New Yorkers would have been killed, and officers put their lives on the line going through that door. They knew they might have been blown up. So let's make sure that we talk about the fact that the vast majority of officers do a good job day in and day out, but this issue of abuse is a problem. And the fact of the matter is there are solutions to these problems. We can eradicate abuse, and we can have proactive policing without cops going over the line. I talked about screening. The fact of the matter is that lost on all of us is the fact that 6 other officers, 4 committed criminal violations and 2 administrative problems just over the last 2 weeks, were dismissed from the force because of problems. Therefore, the fact of the matter is we should not hire police officers until we do thorough background checks, proper psychologicals. We should hire a small number over a period of time, so we choose the very best to police our city. The fact that we had a massive supervisory failure in the 7-0 precinct is also to be acknowledged. We have young sergeants in charge of precincts, 30-year-old sergeants on a midnight to 8 shift on a Friday or a Saturday night in this city. When you can't find a superior officer in this town, try and find a superior officer on a weekend when most of these incidents take place on the late shifts. You simply can't find one. The fact of the matter is we need 500 more sergeants. You have 1 sergeant supervising 50 officers in this city. These are issues of supervision. These are nuts and bolts issues that aren't very sexy, but will go a long way towards solving some of our police abuse problems.
All right, thank you, Mr. Albanese. And your response, your rebuttal. Mr. Melendez. I'm sorry? Wait a minute. The question was posed to... Oh, wait a minute. That's right. We went around this way. I forgot her. Okay, Jesus. You know what? Okay, please.
New Yorkers know that the vast majority of our police officers are fighting crime aggressively without perpetrating any abuses or committing acts of brutality. But we need that to be true for every officer. And what that means is not that we need the National Guard. It means that we need to do a better job of recruitment, that we need to do a very different job of training. Training not only in the academy, but training on an ongoing basis in the precinct and with the community. We also need to begin to train our police officers for the next step in policing in this city, for keeping the peace, which for me means additional police officers on the beat and some real attention to the crimes that are closer to home, to crimes of youth crime, to crime in the schools, and to domestic violence.
All right, thank you very much. We'll get this straight, all right? Your rebuttal time now, Mr. Melendez.
I mean, what do they know, my opponents, what do they know about military experience? They never served, not even the mayor. So they cannot really rebuttal. Says we need, but I have experience. I know how to control masses. I know how to develop cities, how to speak to the people. We have also reverends, we have lawyers, unfortunately, but we have also different, however, but see, the problem with if you have lawyers, you know, they always manipulate to their side, to their own way. They are not really, they speak without the experience. By being sitting behind the desk, you don't know what is going on in the field.
Okay, we're going a little off the subject now, Mr. Melendez. Thank you very much. Okay. Our next question will come from Erson Barrero of El Diario de la Prensa. He'll pose it to Mr. Sharpton.
Buenas noches, Reverendo Alfredo Sharpton.
Buenas noches.
Okay.
Come on, stop stage.
Now I know you don't want to start that. I know you don't want to start that. You're good, but not that good.
It's called which language we talk.
Seriously, Reverend Sharpton, there are those in New York City, including the current mayor, who have at different times branded you with all kinds of adjectives that range from rabble-rouser to racial arsonist. Is it now appropriate for these same people, these same critics, to assume that you're currently exploiting Mr. Luima's pain, suffering, and humiliation for your own political gain, given your record?
Yes, because I think, first of all, that they would have to explain why every case that I fought, including this case, the family called me. I think I should be criticized more if, when the call came in Wednesday morning from the Luima family, I didn't come. I came as a response to their call. I came as a response to several long conversations with their attorneys before I even went to the hospital the first day. And what I have done, I've done in concert with their attorneys. I think the real question they need to ask themselves is, why don't people call them when they get in trouble? Because if we are all these bad things, why do people come to us and not them? Maybe because they come where they can get help and support and relief from. That is a political statement. So exploiting someone, first of all, when you respond to a case, you don't know whether a case is going to be big or small. I'm on a case right now that no one knows about. You don't. You put your resources, you put your time in. So I think that their problem is that they can't explain why, with all their demonizing of me, they can't stop people from relating. And when people in the city get in trouble in many communities, they call me rather than the people that they are being paid to protect them, but they don't have the confidence that they will. So I think that their attacks on me is an admission of their ineffectiveness. I think if you look at the fact that in many of these cases, these are people who are victimized by the very people that want to critique and decide who ought to stand up on their behalf. So they want it both ways. They want to choose both sides of the field, be the referee, and then decide who's going to win the game. It's ridiculous. And I think that the mayor is in a real dilemma when, with all he tried to do cosmetically, the lawyers and the family and all still reached out to people that were openly opposed to him and said, we're not going to be intimidated into choosing who we're reaching out to.
All right. Mr. Albanese, your response.
Well, politically, what I see happening today is the mayor convening another commission that's going to cost this taxpayers $15 million when we just completed an extensive report by the Mullen Commission that was composed of members of the judiciary, people from law enforcement who really have in-depth knowledge of this area, talk about covering your political flank. It's not only, the mayor's not only covering his political flank, but he's also costing the taxpayers $15 million. We know that what has to be done. We need leadership We need reforms that are out there that need to be implemented to address the issue of police abuse and prevent further incidents from taking place in this city.
Ms. Messenger.
Buenas noches, Gerson. Estoy aprendiendo su lengua porque esta es una ciudad bilingüe. I think that it is incredibly important that people in this city who find themselves victims at the hands of the city believe that there is someone that they can reach out to. I believe that they ought to have a mayor who will be there for them, who will speak out, and who will get involved, particularly when the abuse has been perpetrated by people who work for the city of New York, by people who are sworn to uphold the law. I made the point last week that at the same time as the mayor was focusing all of his attention on this case in the 70th precinct because he thought it made him look bad if he didn't act, there was another incident that the mayor was very busy sweeping under the rug. At the New Day shelter for battered women in the Bronx, city employees and guards that the city hired to protect those women were trading sex for food with the residents. And the Department of Investigation of the Giuliani administration literally described that behavior and the fact that guards were sleeping with residents.
We're straying a little bit from the subject.
As a management issue. It's not a management issue. It's precisely the kind of horror at the hands of people working for the city that a mayor must step in and vow to stop. And the mayor must be there for the victims of that kind of abuse.
All right. Are you two going to go now in Spanish? Shall we get ready for this?
¿Podemos hablar? Mucho gusto. We can blame the mayor all the time, you know. But the problem that part of our responsibility as a citizen is in our hands. When we vote for any issue, when we vote for any representative, when we also decide where we're going to send our children, when we pick up, but the only problem that we cannot really select is who is going to be a commander or any prison in the city, unfortunately. However, I think, as I keep saying, we need in order to improve the police department system, we need a stronger management that could be enforced by the FBI or by the National Guard. I kept saying that because somebody has to listen. Unfortunately, Bob Dole, you know, he requested to patrol our border.
We're way off base here on this subject here. We were speaking specifically about political exploitation in terms of the Louima case, but we're going to move on now to Mr. Sharpton.
Well, back to the original question. I think that how you judge political exploitation, Herson, is by people's track record. The one that is acting differently in this case is Rudy Giuliani. I'm doing what I always have done, even before I ran for office. The only one that is acting differently is Mr. Giuliani. So that's where the pattern of political exploitation must be raised. Secondly, Jesse Jackson, who came in announcing his support of my race, said in some communities, people call Reverend Al when they don't call the elected official or the biggest preacher, because they know he will come. So his trying to depict me as an ambulance chaser is because he doesn't understand in many areas I'm the ambulance. Because the ambulance won't show up, I will.
Okay. All right, our next question is from Dominic Carter for South Albanese.
We're going to move to other topics, trust me, in just a second, but just one other question on this topic. Mr. Albanese, you have talked about your support from law enforcement unions, but it seems the PBA has taken a rather low profile recently. Should the PBA be doing more to root out misconduct?
Absolutely, and I think what the PBA has done in this case is very, very positive. What the PBA has done is they've instructed all police officers who know anything about the incident in the 7-0 precinct to come forward. That's the responsible position, and the PBA as a labor union, advocating for their members also helps its own image when they do that. So I believe that in this case, the PBA has acted properly. And I'm very proud, Dominic, to have the support of the Sergeants Benevolent Association and the Port Authority Police, as well as the detectives in the District Attorney's Office, because I enjoy a good rapport with the law enforcement community, as well as with all communities around the city, which I think makes me uniquely qualified to lead this city. I think I have confidence on both sides of the aisle, unlike, for example, one of my opponents in this race who law enforcement groups forget about endorsing, they won't even meet with her. So I think that is something that's very important to have. You have to have the confidence of the rank and file as well as the communities around the city of New York. So Dominic, I'm proud of that record.
Okay. Your reaction, Ms. Messenger.
The question of the role of the PBA or of any city union is really for that group to determine, both on an issue and in endorsements. I think that the focus that must be maintained is on the mayor, because when the mayor is not setting an example, no union is going to be thorough in steering its members to understand everything that needs to be done to continue the war against crime, to be sure that we keep the peace, and to be certain that we root out abuse and brutality. When the commission that I called for, or the Mullen Commission, were it to be established, were to deal fully with the problem of police abuse, then I would assume that they would engage the PBA, for the PBA to talk about its experiences, the experience of its members in policing the streets of this city, that we would then have an opportunity to hear that perspective as well, because certainly the men and women in blue and their representatives have a great deal to say about their experience in working in communities. That would be part of a real dialogue and a serious effort to get to the bottom of how we avoid further and future instances of abuse.
Thank you, Ms. Messenger. Mr. Melendez, should the PBA do more to root out misconduct?
The PBA is dealing with the mayor also. This, unfortunately, many of the city union leaders are dealing with the mayor right now. I think that as a prosecutor, he is scared him off, you know. He must know something about that, those who leading the union right now. And it is wrong that the PBA doesn't act really independent. He has, they always, either they endorse or don't endorse a politician based in who's going to raise their salaries. Whoever says he's going to raise their salary, right away they're going to show up with him on cameras. That's what they care more about.
How about police misconduct? Anything else to offer? Mr. Sharpton.
Well, I think that clearly the PBA has been more than just someone dealing with its members. They have very aggressively supported certain cases that I think are detrimental even to police. There have been incidents where police against police have happened, and the PBA, in my judgment, has not taken a strong moral position. We cannot forget this mayor led a very profane rally that PBA people supported when Mayor Dinkins was in, that still is an image in a lot of our minds. So I think the PBA does have a responsibility to stand up and ask for officers to do the right thing, but they also should set the tone themselves. And I must say that I differ with those that act as if an officer is a hero to do his job, to know of a crime or to have witnessed a crime and not turn the crime in is a crime. That's obstruction of justice. And we cannot go to schools and tell kids to turn in drug dealers and turn in people that are committing crime and then act like a policeman is doing something extraordinary to turn in a criminal who may be his partner. We've got to have one standard in the city, and the police ought to be the example of the standard, not be coaxed or cuddled into doing what they took an oath to do in the first place.
All right. Your rebuttal, Mr. Albanese.
Well, I think it's important for the PBA and any law enforcement group to have the support of the community. Police officers depend on communities to do their job. So it's incumbent upon all law enforcement organizations to work closely with communities. When you have alienation, you simply will have problems, not only for the citizenry, but also for the police officers, because they're out there and they also need the public's help to solve problems. So it is very important that the PBA and all law enforcement organizations work closely with communities. I plan on bringing them together. I have a good rapport with both the law enforcement community and communities around the city, diverse communities around the city, because that's really what leadership is all about. It's about bringing people together to work on behalf of the public interest, and I know that I can do that as mayor.
Okay. Now, Beth Fertig has a question of Ruth Messenger.
We're going to move on to another topic now. Ms. Messenger, you've repeatedly criticized the mayor for not doing enough to create jobs for more New Yorkers, often citing the current 10% unemployment rate. And yet Mayor Giuliani has already cut the commercial rent tax and the unincorporated business tax, cuts that you also support. What would you do that's different than what the mayor is doing to create more jobs, and how would you pay for that?
The first thing that I would do is to acknowledge the dimensions of the serious problem that exists in the city of New York. Let's be clear about what that problem is. Nationally, unemployment has gone down below 5%. But in the city of New York, unemployment has now hit 10%. It's twice the national average. And we have a mayor who tries very hard to sweep that problem under the rug and to pretend that it is solely a sign of good economic health that unemployment is going up. Well, not where I come from. Where I come from, rising unemployment is a sign that too many people don't have a job. And so what I would do as mayor is acknowledge this problem, define it as a crisis for the future of the city. Pay attention to the comptroller's discovery last week that while the number of jobs in New York has gone up slightly in the last 6 months, those jobs and many more jobs in the city are going to people from the suburbs. What does that mean that we need to do? We need to switch from giving tax breaks. Rudolph Giuliani has given well over $500 million in tax breaks to large Fortune 500 companies, which in some are losing jobs. What we need is targeted tax breaks, tax credits for the small businesses that we know are the job generators for the city of New York. We need to help small businesses and new entrepreneurs get easier access to credit. Indeed, we need to eliminate the rest of the commercial rent tax, sharply curtail the unincorporated business tax. That's the way in which we stimulate those businesses that can grow jobs. But we also need to pay very serious attention to the failures of this city to develop its own labor force. Because if we want the jobs that we grow in this city to go to the people who live in this city and the people who are educated in this city, then we better take steps now, which I would do as mayor, to be sure that we have an education system that will train young people for the jobs that are going to be available in this city in the 21st century.
Oh, Mr. Melendez, what would you do to create more jobs, and how would you pay for them?
As you well know, New York City is no longer a manufactured city. New York City is a gold mine. It's a tourist gold mine. I have an idea by creating in those abandoned areas in New York City some sort of style or Disney-style amusement parks. We have to develop those areas to attract more business, tourist centers, conventions, stadiums. The whole world want to come to New York. Why not use those resources? Why we always have to rely in what we manufacture? We haven't understand yet that we are still, we don't manufacture anything in the city of New York. We have NAFTA, who took away many jobs from the city. We also have a high increase in rent. That tax rate is going down like you went down, but as Mrs. Messenger said, it's still not going down 100%. They're still paying. So we have to lower taxes to to a small and mega business to attract more business to the city of New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharpton.
I think as you lower the commercial tax, I think you've also got to deal with the reality that we need to sit with the private sector and have a serious dialogue, and I as mayor would do so, about their commitment to dealing with those citizens in the city. New hires should be the mandate for tax incentives and tax abatements. We had a $50 million tax abatement given by this administration to the First Bank of Boston, and several weeks later they laid off 900 workers. There should not be a detachment between what will benefit the citizens and what benefits the private sector entity that we want to keep in the city. Keep in the city at whose expense and for whose benefit. I think there must be a marriage where business grows, but business is committed to hiring people in the city. I think we also need to deal with, as I have said throughout this campaign, raising the commuter tax. Someone in Fairfield County, Connecticut, that the average family there makes 4 times more than someone in the Bronx, but the person in the Bronx pays about a 10 times higher rate of tax. So people are coming in the city, making more money, leaving and paying less taxes, and we sit here with a revenue problem and with double-digit unemployment. I think we've got to clearly keep taxes down for citizens in the cities, but commuters need to pay at the same percentage they do in other large cities, because we are in a very serious situation moving toward a crisis when we're in double-digit unemployment, and it's higher than 10% in some areas of the city. And for a mayor not to aggressively deal with that with the private sector, particularly those that have municipal contracts or that ask for tax incentives and tax abatements, means the mayor is only concerned about people at a certain level of income rather than the average middle-class family that is still struggling in the city. The boom on Wall Street is not booming all over the 5 boroughs. We need to have a balanced growth, not just a Wall Street boom.
Mr. Albanese.
The unincorporated business tax and the commercial tax, or commercial rent tax, are bad taxes, and certainly they should be eliminated in order to begin to address the 10% unemployment rate in this city. But we have to do more. We need an economic development agency that has a leader that comes from the private sector, who has a vision for diversifying the economy, not only in the area of big business and big real estate, but also small business, emerging industries. I'm proud to have the endorsement, or will have the endorsement on Thursday, of the Small Business Congress, which represents tens of thousands of small business owners in the city, because they realize the city's economic development agency is simply dysfunctional. It's basically a tax break agency for wealthy campaign contributors. There are very few people there who have skills and talents that can begin to be creative about bringing down this unemployment rate, using our contracting power to feed city-based contractors, using tremendous waterfront and industrial property that we have in this city. This city is almost like a country. It has great resources. The fact of the matter is that a 10% unemployment rate is unconscionable with the wealth and the kinds of resources we have in New York. What you need is vision. You also need a campaign finance system, despite the good intentions of the Campaign Finance Board, that really is about small contributors running the city for average New Yorkers. When you have most of the campaigns fueled by big real estate, big business, what you have is a one-tiered economy.
Questions about job creation, but we're going to ask you if you have a rebuttal now, Ms. Messenger.
Yes, for job creation, we need an economic development agency that isn't a patronage haven for Ray Harding and his friends, that isn't a home for campaign workers. As mayor, I'm not only going to cut taxes and provide support for new and smaller businesses, I will do economic planning with neighborhoods. For example, working with the people in Staten Island to develop the much too long abandoned Homeport site. I will help stabilize and grow manufacturers, link tax breaks and city contracts to concrete agreements to generate jobs for New Yorkers. And Beth, let me just point out that an investment in growing the economy of this city benefits not only New Yorkers, but the city of New York. It's a money maker for all of us.
All right. Erson Barrero for Eric Ruano Melendez.
Senor Ruano Melendez, your name recognition, quite honestly, to Big Apple voters is so off the meter that you don't even come up in any of the polls. Furthermore, your platform seems to range from conservative to extremist. Aren't you, in fact, Senor Ruano Melendez, more in tune with Mayor Giuliani and his policies than any of your 3 Democratic opponents? And, for example, let's look specifically at the issues of domestic violence and child abuse. How would a Mayor Ruano Melendez deal with these 2 major problems of this city?
First, before I start, I want to thank to the sponsor of this program, New York One. part of my ideas or issues that you said, Mr. Borrego, are related to Giuliani in a way. I come and I born in a country where when I was in Guatemala, Central America, we have some sort of dictators, as you call them, because they were military. But it still was better than today. Today is a disaster. A disaster until this new president came. So in the city, you have to be strong. I mean, you have to be a combination of Rudy Giuliani and David Dinkins, you know. Some sort of that. A gentleman for some cases, and you have to be rude in some other areas. You're dealing with rude people also. You're reading with gentlemen at some times. And I don't think you cannot blame everything. You got to give credit to the people, even if you don't like him, they are from the opposite party. But if he's doing well in some areas, why not praise the person? Why always go against? Because that's what I was advised as a political candidate, just to knock down somebody else, even if he got a good model. Right now, with child abuse and domestic violence, child abuse, first of all, haven't been controlled for years. It's still going on. Battered women, the same. Right now, they have the way they establishing the policy. I think is working.
Okay.
It is working.
Okay.
Can I have
20 seconds.
However, we can have, like I said before, an independent civilian review to control those areas. We need heavy enforcement.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one point, Edison, the question in terms of the responses, are we talking about the specific candidates comparison in terms of their political record to Giuliani, or are they all commenting on his particular stance?
I'd like to address the issues of domestic violence and child abuse, which is really what I
Okay,
was
because
trying
the
to
last
get
part
Mr.
of your question dealt with his...
So you don't want us to address his candidates?
I think that he's done very well, Mr. Chairman.
I'm just trying to be clear, because I think he's the life of this party.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Mr. Sharpton, please.
One, I think that anyone that qualifies for the ballot ought to be able to run, and they ought to be heard. And I think that whether I agree or disagree, I think that they have a seat at the table. I think if the party is ever going to win, and it should, that they ought to be included. And I think they ought to support the winner despite whatever disagreements we have. I think that in terms of the programs that you name, one, we've got to deal with the fact that this is an administration that deals on crises. There was a crisis in the Bronx with child abuse, and for a week, Mr. Giuliani did everything in the world about child abuse. There's a crisis on police brutality. Now we're going to see him do that until you come up with another crisis. What you need is a plan. You need a proactive mayor and proactive government that deals with how to deal with servicing people like battered women, like abused children all the time, not wait on a catastrophe and then try to throw a cold blanket on it with your friends in the tabloids helping you and wait until the next crisis before you try to come up with the next blanket. I spoke at a battered women's shelter the other night in Harlem. Not only would I seek to increase the budget items that have been decreased for battered women programs, I would also be particular about programs that are concerned to a lot of battered women, programs that try to keep their families together, programs that house their children with them, and that do not try to displace children as long as there's no record of child abuse by that battered parent. Because many battered women go through two batterings, one from their mate or their husband, and the other by the bureaucracy that with no review just tears their children away from them and has their children sent one place, they another, and never have the commitment or the goal of trying to reconcile what's left of a family. Just because a woman is battered does not mean she cannot raise her children. I was raised by a single mother who was able to bring us through. So I would be conscious to have administrators that wanted to try to keep families contained, and I would want to get more resources to them. In terms of child abuse, I think we need more and more extensive monitoring of where we're placing these children. And again, the goal ought to be trying to put people in contained family atmospheres, healthy atmospheres, and not deal with them as numbers and clients that have some code name next to them, but to try and put them in the mainstream of society from the best family structure that is available to them. That ought to be the commitment of the city, not to just put money there, but money behind programs that will really reconcile either the battered woman, if that's the case, or the child that was abused. And I think that kind of sense of caring about people is what most bothers me about this administration.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sharpton. Mr. Albanese?
Well, the way I would address the issue of domestic violence is to ensure that we have quality shelters for battered women that are well-staffed, that the Agency for Children's Services has a good manager and someone who makes sure that social workers have an adequate caseload so that they are not overwhelmed, that working conditions and morale are good for those workers so they can do their job properly. And I also introduced a plan just last week on how to address youth violence in this city, a comprehensive plan involving law enforcement, involving youth service providers that would do intervention and prevention, modeled after a plan in Boston and modeled after a plan that I outlined in 1990 on youth violence, which basically has police officers who respond to cases of child abuse, domestic violence, and then they take the young person to the hospital, and then they identify that person as someone who's battered, and they work with the social service providers, the health care workers, to intervene early, because the children that are abused become abusers later on. So it's important to have a comprehensive effort to address this early on, early intervention. I think Reverend Sharpton made an excellent point. What we have in this city is a crisis-oriented mayor and a crisis-oriented administration. And we've been crisis-oriented for a long time, even prior to this administration. We don't do things on a comprehensive level, on a long-range basis. It's get me through the next election and hasta la vista. That's the way the city continues to be run.
All right, Mr. Albanese, thank you. Ms. Messenger.
Erson, these are indeed the crimes closer to home that I was talking about before. Child abuse and neglect, domestic or family violence. I did a definitive report with Councilmember Ronnie Eldridge, which made recommendations that have not been followed by this administration. They haven't done the work in schools, in hospitals, in the court system that would help the people of this, in those agencies understand how to deal with this incredibly serious problem. And look at the result. Right now, on average, every 90 seconds, a woman in this city experiences abuse in her home or from her partner. When women are ready to flee their batterers, a very tough decision to make, this city can currently provide shelter for only 1 in every 7 of such women. That is a life-threatening tragedy. What do we need to do? We need to define domestic violence as a crime. We need to eliminate the prevailing and dangerous habit of double arrests, arresting both the batterer and the battered. We need to enforce orders of protection. We need, let me go back to the point I made before, to terminate the contract of the door security company whose employees stood in a shelter for battered women, watched women be battered by their abusers outside the front door, and watched employees of the City of New York sleep with the residents of that shelter. And one more point on foster care in the child welfare system. Right now, this city has left some 900 foster parents who are providing care for children separated from their parents, and Rudy Giuliani forgot to pay those families and is asking foster parents to continue to provide care when the agency is not able to pay them. That happens to many agencies every summer. It is unconscionable, and it would not happen in a messenger administration.
All right, Mr. Ruano Melendez, you can make a short rebuttal if you'd like. You can pass if you'd like.
Well, if I have to rebuttal, I go back to Mr. Borrego again. Child abuse and domestic violence, as I say, has been going through the city for years. What we have to do right now is to enforce family values in people, because child abuse is also at home, not only in shelters, not only on the street. Family values is what we're losing right now in the city of New York. We have a lot of single mothers, parents that forget their duties as a father. They're running away. And it's very easy to get divorced in New York City. I think we should pay more attention, not to make it that easy for people to get divorced, to stay together, because they have a duty as parents to support that particular child. But they just make marriage, a wedding, like a fun game. You marry today and 2 days later you're divorced. This is wrong. We have to enforce family values 100%.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to Dominic Carter with Al Sharpton.
Mr. Sharpton, here's a question that can't be simply explained away as a hypothetical because it's actually happened here in the city of New York. If a security firm is doing a good job, in fact, an excellent job of protecting a housing development here in New York City, if it is affiliated in any way with Nation of Islam leader Minister Louis Farrakhan, would you call for its ouster?
Well, I think that you have just seen the court's rule that that is wrong. I think that if a security firm or any firm is contracted to do business and it fulfills the contract, that ought to be the basis of the review. Because once you start canceling contracts based on someone's religious affiliation, then everyone has the right to object to someone's religious affiliation. And I think that it is absolutely unconstitutional and absolutely unfair for people to be awarded or denied contracts based on whom and how they choose to worship God. And I think that that's how the decision came down in this particular court case that you're talking about, the ex-security patrol in Brooklyn. I think that a lot of people who want to see fairness for other walks of life throw the Constitution out the window when they get an opportunity to race bait and escalate tensions rather than deal with fundamental questions. No one denied in that particular case whether they were fulfilling the contract. They wanted to deal with their religious affiliation. And I think that that is a dangerous precedent to set that opens the door to anyone to raise the same objections about other firms that may have contracts with the state or the city.
All right, Mr. Albanese, any reaction?
Everyone is entitled to practice their own religion. We have freedom of religion in America, and government does not have a right to do business, should not do business with any group, whether it be Minister Farrakhan or any group that preaches hate against another group. It's one thing to practice your own religion, but if leaflets or information is passed out which preaches hatred against another group, then I think government has a responsibility to ensure that we don't do business with such a company or such a contractor.
Ms. Messenger.
I think as well that what we need to be very careful about is that any group with whom we are doing business not be a group that exists primarily for the purpose of advancing its own religious ideas or beliefs, particularly when those ideas or beliefs involve calling other groups into question, involve passing out materials that challenge the right of another group to exist or that do harm or abuse to that other group. And that is a general principle, and that is how it needs to be tested and applied. I would go further and say that part of this is dealt with precisely by how we develop the contracts that we have as a city with various groups. Because when we give any organization city money, we need to hold them accountable to fulfill the terms of the contract. And every city contract should make it absolutely clear that we cannot do business with people who, on city time, with city money, are advancing their own beliefs, whatever those beliefs are, but particularly if those beliefs do harm and danger to another group.
Louis, let me pass the follow-up. Sure. Well, we haven't finished. Mr. Albanese or Ms. Messenger, whether they were called for the outfit, they didn't answer that. That was a question
question?
Please, Mr. Albanese.
If leaflets are being distributed that preach hatred against another group, then they should be ousted.
Ms. Messenger.
I agree with that principle. In other words, it depends what the group believes and what they're doing to act on their beliefs. On city time, with city money, with taxpayer money, no group can do anything to advance its own principles and its own beliefs. That's wrong, and it can be harmful to the people with whom they are dealing.
Mr. Melendez.
I think with or without city money should be against the law, especially when we're dealing with religion. When Fidel Castro came to USA, Mr. Giuliani didn't welcome him. However, the president of the United States is shaking hands with him and with Arafat, but the mayor doesn't want to do it.
Okay.
So that contradicts many issues. So that becomes personal.
Securities firms,
I don't say
affiliation,
that.
Nation of
No,
Islam.
I support Mr. Giuliani because that's going it's going against our own. Even that he doesn't have military experience.
Would you be
I had
for,
it, and I know.
Would you be for or against the security firm's affiliation with the Nation of Islam?
Say it again.
Security firm's affiliation with the Nation of Islam.
What about?
Okay, we'll move on, Mr. Sharpton. Your rebuttal, if you care to.
I think that in the case that you have referred to, Mr. Carter, was litigated, and there was all the opportunity in the world to prove the basis that Ms. Messenger and Mr. Albanese raised. It was not proven. So I think that we don't have to speculate. People had the opportunity to come forward. It was determined by the courts they were not, in fact, doing that. So I think that we need to deal again with what was found, and that is people have the right to have a private business and be a member of whatever group they want. I also am curious to a lot of people, including the mayor and the governor, that raised questions about this private group, did not have a lot of vocal questions when there was sheriff deputies that stopped doing their job for particular groups in this city. So we got to play the game by one set of rules if we're going to talk at all about how we use city money and city personnel. And let us not fabricate or imagine things that could happen if, in fact, there's been litigation and evidence could not substantiate that that, in fact, is what happened.
All right. Beth Burdick for Sal Albanese.
Mr. Albanese, you went to Albany this year and you stood alongside tenants lobbying to continue the rent controls. Yet even with these rent protections, the city's vacancy rate is less than 5%, and there are many landlords who complain that it's too expensive to build. I want to know what you would do to encourage developers to build more affordable housing.
Very good point, Beth. And those people that are concerned about rent regulation should know that if we go above 5%, rent regulation is no longer an issue, because then you have real competition, you have a marketplace that works. I would do what Mayor Koch did when he was mayor. He allocated about $4 billion from the capital budget to build tens of thousands of affordable housing units in the city of New York, for starters. Then I would work with nonprofit groups and nonprofit developers in this city, like, for example, EBC, the East Brooklyn Congregations, where the city gives them land, turns it over to them. They build affordable housing. They've built thousands of units, one-family homes for working families in Brooklyn. They're doing it in the Bronx. They do it very cost-effectively. I would also go to Albany and go to Washington to lobby for housing assistance for urban centers. It is a disgrace that the HUD has really eroded allocations for affordable housing in this city and in this country. So I would take a three-tiered approach. The capital budget, I would work with nonprofit developers and some of the groups that are already working to build affordable housing in the city. I would also lobby Albany and Washington for more housing aid for cities. And as the mayor of New York, you have a bully pulpit. You can do that. You can do things that are beyond your scope as the mayor.
You mentioned Mr. Koch's $4 billion program. That's very expansive. Would you be willing to commit to something as big as that?
I don't want to give you any specific numbers at this point, but I can tell you that I will certainly have a housing and preservation agency that has a commissioner that knows something about housing. that is an expert in housing, and that would certainly increase the allocation to the capital budget to build more affordable housing. I think it's essential. We have tremendous problems in this city. We have people that are sleeping in basements with 40 or 50 people. We have illegal conversions going on, causing dangerous conditions throughout the city of New York, and I would stop that, by the way. And I would not defund the buildings department as was done, but I would make affordable housing one of my top priorities. But we cannot do it alone as a city. We do need help from Washington, and we do need help from Albany.
Your response, Ms. Messenger. Okay. Response from Ms. Messenger?
Beth, first of all, I stood with the tenants in Albany and made a very specific proposal, and that is that it is time to get the rent laws for the people of this city decided in this city by the people who live here. We need to fight for home rule so that it is no longer the case that horse farmers decide what it is the tenants in the city of New York should be paying for rent. Rudy Giuliani is losing us affordable housing units every year. And one of the things that I would do is be sure that there were sufficient housing inspectors and building inspectors so that we really took code enforcement seriously and so that units did not literally fall out of use because of lack of sufficient inspection and sufficient enforcement. To get more units requires a mayor to go to Washington to fight for our fair share of federal tax credits for low-income housing, requires a mayor to go to Albany to create a similar state credit, to work with our legislative leaders to bring some of the state surplus into the city of New York to help us build affordable housing. I would make both of those trips on a regular basis. I would work with projects like the New York City Partnership and Nehemiah Houses, specifically with the notion of using scarce city money, as you point out, to provide some additional subsidies so that the purchase price for low-income co-ops was lower and more people could afford them. And I have continued since the day I got into office to be a supporter of requiring that large housing developers who are building market or luxury housing and receiving tax breaks must provide 20% affordable housing as a condition of receiving those tax breaks.
Okay, Mr. Melendez.
I agree with affordable housing. However, I guess affordable housing should go according to salaries. I guess there is many citizens who make tremendous, very high salaries. They're still paying a very low rent. What we have to improve is by providing ample incentives and opportunities for development or low and middle income housing through the 5 boroughs to families and individuals, community groups and entrepreneurs. First, by making it easy to own a residence or a building in the city possession when you might be currently a tenant or an abandoned residence, by building what you might be interested in repairing and owning. Second, by equalizing the taxation status of cooperatives and condominiums apartments with those of residential property in the 5 boroughs. Third, by exploring ways of facilitating financing and refinancing for cooperatives and condominiums, and by exploring ways of facilitating the conversion of cooperatives to horizontal property for cases where tenant shareholders choose the form of ownership.
Okay, Mr. Melendez, we're winding down now. We're going to have to move along to get our opening or closing statements in. So, Mr. Sharpton.
Well, I think that clearly one must again underscore that the available affordable housing under the Giuliani administration has declined on an annual basis. As mayor, I would not only lobby hard in Albany and in Washington, and I would remind our viewers that in Washington now at HUD is the former governor of New York's son, Mr. Cuomo, and Mr. Giuliani supported Mr. Cuomo. I don't know why he couldn't talk to Andrew about helping here. But I think that clearly we need to have a mayor that will use City Hall as a bully pulpit to expose the inadequacy of the federal and state involvement in expanding the affordable housing base in the city. I would also work with the nonprofit groups in partnerships to develop affordable housing. I preached this past Sunday at St. Paul's Community Baptist Church in East New York, which was one of the groups, Reverend Youngblood, that did a lot of this. And these people need to be brought further into the loop of how to plan citywide and how to make what they have done in pockets of the city, despite whoever was in City Hall, how to make that possible citywide. It can happen, and it has happened with these nonprofit groups having partnerships with the private sector, but that must be married with an aggressive lobbying plan from a mayor in Albany and in Washington. And under the Sharpton administration, I would certainly put the spotlight on the state and the federal government that I do not think has done its fair share for New Yorkers in the affordable housing area.
Okay, Reverend Sharpton, we have to save time for Mr. Albanese's rebuttal, if you care.
I'll yield.
Okay, that concludes our questioning for this evening. Thank you so much for being so close to the rules as possible. Thanks to our panel. Now, each candidate has 2 minutes for a closing statement. And again, the order was chosen by lot. We're going to start with the life of the party, Mr. Rolando Melendez.
I was supposed to be second in the choosing.
It's not the order that I have.
You got the order wrong.
Not in the closing statements. Our order is you first.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. To render tribute to all Americans, war veterans, listen to the 2 lines of the national anthem. Oh, es the land of free and the home of the brave. My dear fellow New Yorkers, you now have a choice whether you want to continue receiving deficiency service, deteriorating environment, full of drug dealers, homeless, sleeping in the subways, dirty street, full of garbage, collapsing buildings, rats running all over the city, mothers killing their babies, corrupted officials indicted, police and correctional officers brutalizing civilians, poor educational system, lack of security when you go to work, when parents can't afford to pay the rent and feed their families, senior citizens worry about rent control increases, corrupted landlords evicting tenants to convert their building to co-ops, unhealthy prostitutes transmitting diseases because they don't have medical checkups. People are treated like a human garbage. My dear brothers and sisters, I'm the only candidate that understands you very well. I am a family man, and I've been trained by the military to establish law and order in time of war, and our city is in time of war against the polluted environment. None of my opponents have the military experience, and I'm the only one who can beat Rudy Giuliani. We don't need a compassionate dictator. We don't need a racial activist. We don't need an ultra-liberal.
30 seconds.
We need a person moderate.
A military coup.
All right.
Exactly.
All right, you'll have your time, Mr. Sharpton.
Now that you interrupt me, you're going to give me my 30 seconds.
You have 20 seconds, sir. 20 seconds.
I was 30 seconds. If you elect me as the mayor of the city of New York, I promise that I will serve to all of you, to all races, to all religions, and all cultures. Remember, on September 7th, vote for Juan Melendez for mayor.
Thank you,
You won't regret it.
Thank you, Mr. Melendez. The next closing statement comes from Ruth Messenger. Please.
Vote for me on September 9th.
Okay. We should refrain from interrupting the other candidates, please. Ms. Messenger, please refrain from interrupting the candidate. We're winding down here.
Thank you, Louis. I want to reassure all of you that I won't sing. First, let me thank the Campaign Finance Board, the sponsors and participating press, St. Francis College, and most importantly, the people of New York, for a chance to talk about what kind of city we can be as we move into the 21st century. I believe in this city. I believe in its families. I believe in its workers. I especially believe in its children. And I will make the education of these children my top priority as mayor because Rudy Giuliani has failed them. For all these New Yorkers, for all of you, for all of us, I believe this city can do better. I see a city where all our kids learn not only to read and write, but learn right from wrong. A city with no weapons in our schools, where our teachers can teach, where our kids have somewhere to go after school, and where no child goes to school in a closet or a bathroom. I see a city where our working families share in our prosperity because New York's jobs go to people who live here. A city where we treat crime in and near our homes as seriously as we treat crime on our streets. I see a city that cares for its hungry and its homeless, that leaves no one behind. And yes, I see a city where the name of the mayor is identified with kids and families and neighborhoods and schools instead of being chanted during acts of unspeakable brutality. We can be this better city. If you don't think that anything in this city can be made better, then stick with Rudy. But if you believe we should set higher expectations, not only for our students and our teachers,
30.
but for ourselves and for our city, then I hope you will join with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Messenger. Now to Sal Albanese. Mr. Albanese, your closing statement.
First of all, let me congratulate the Campaign Finance Board, St. Francis College, WNYC, New York One, and El Diario for sponsoring this forum. I, Sal Albanese, am the New York experience. I came here from Italy at the age of 8. I attended the public schools in this city and City University of New York when tuition was for free. And I became a school teacher. I became part of the great middle class in New York City. I want to offer the same opportunity to all other New Yorkers. I believe I'm the strongest candidate against Rudy Giuliani, the strongest Democrat. As a matter of fact, Ray Harding, one of the mayor's top advisors, noted that recently. Dick Morris, who's a political consultant of note, pointed out that Ms. Messenger simply cannot win against Rudy Giuliani because she cannot compete with him on the crime issue. I can compete with Giuliani on the crime issue and then take him on the areas where he has been a dismal failure, on education, on campaign finance reform. I stand for a fair city. That's why I have over 30 labor unions supporting my candidacy, the working men and women of this city. The small business groups in this city are supporting my candidacy. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the hoopla at a city hall, life has become harder for most New Yorkers. Fact of the matter is, real wages have eroded for average New Yorkers under Giuliani. Rents are up 20%. Transit fares are up. Unemployment is 10%. Tuition is up at our schools. We can have a mayor in this city that cares about all New Yorkers. I'd like to be a mayor that can go into any neighborhood in this city and people will say, Mayor Albanese cares about us.
30.
I can be that mayor. Thank you very much.
Okay, and our final closing statement comes from the Reverend Al Sharpton.
I spoke today in Staten Island at the Rotary Club and talked to people who had 4 years ago voted for Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani has managed a city where he has used the expertise he had to manage an already declining crime area and to deal with trying to lure business to stay in the city. But in my judgment, and in the judgment of a growing number of people, he has done all he can do for the city of New York. He does not have the skills, the capacity, or the compassion to deal with the problems of education, to deal with the problems of unemployment, to deal with the problems of battered women and abused children, to deal with the problems of domestic violence and police brutality. The contribution that he can make, he has made. Where we are going now is waters that he cannot swim in, and he cannot chart a course. We need a mayor that understands more than the limited amount of things that Mr. Giuliani tries to sell the city on, and he even exaggerates his record there. We need a candidate in this party that can energize a movement against this type of trickle-down economic theory, against this type of ignoring social problems until they become crises. I'm the candidate that can build that movement, and only a movement will succeed. When that policeman said it's Giuliani time, even though it may have been unfair,
30.
it represented a spirit that we can't tolerate in this city going into the 21st century. It's time for justice and fairness and jobs and education. That's what time it is. It may have been Giuliani time, but that time must end this November, and we must have time for the people going into the 21st century. I'm the candidate that can bring that time into being. Thank you.
As always do.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sharpton. Well, that concludes our first ever mandatory debate held under the auspices of the city's Campaign Finance Board. We'd like to thank Ruth Messenger, Eric Ruano Melendez, Sal Albanese, Al Sharpton, and my colleague Dominic Carter from New York One, Beth Furtick from WNYC, and Ersin Barrero of El Diario La Prensa. The leading Democratic candidates for mayor will take part in one more televised debate on September 7th, 2 days before the primary. Thanks for joining us.